Since last year, the average person has seen nearly a month's worth of extra hotter than usual days, and those additional abnormal days can be attributed to human-caused climate change. That's according to a recent analysis from nonprofit Climate Central. But not all hope is lost, at least according to my next guest. He says there is reason to be optimistic in the war against climate change. Climate investor and activist Tom Steyer says there is reason to be optimistic in that war. He outlines the state of play in a new book, Cheaper, Faster, Better: How We'll Win the Climate War. And he's joining me now in studio. Thanks so much for being here.
Julie, thank you for having me.
I read that report today about those hotter days, and it is just the latest in a long line of really depressing news. And we, anecdotally, we see these reports in the news every day, right, about weather events, et cetera. Why are you optimistic?
Well, let's start. I want to start by confirming everything you say. The news from the natural world has been consistently not just bad, but worse than expected. And in fact, this is the hottest planet that human beings have ever walked right now. But people don't always know that. But what they also don't know, which I know as a result of spending my time professionally investing in companies that are leading the counter-revolution, is that the technology is better than anybody knows. That not only have solar and wind come down in cost and are really spreading quickly, but that the cliche in the climate world is we're not looking for a silver bullet, we're looking for silver buckshot. Lots of companies addressing lots of problems that can win in the marketplace on their own because they are, in fact, as my book says, cheaper, faster, and better. Let's win in the marketplace. We can do it, and we need people to get together and make it happen.
Where are we on that winning in the marketplace, right? Because one of the other things that you talk about is sort of getting society on the same page. You talk about, and you talked about in the Q&A accompanying the book as well, about the effort around World War II and victory gardens and this sort of sentiment of everybody being on the same team, pulling in the same direction. Doesn't feel like that right now, and it's hard to get people to make daily changes. They want everything to be perfect without having to do anything.
Well, let me say this. We're not asking people to sacrifice economically. As I said, if it's not good enough to win in the marketplace, it's not going to happen. But let me give you an example of something where whatever the talk is, we can see what's really happening, and that's Texas. If there's a state where the elected officials have disliked the idea of renewable energy, have disliked the idea of whatever ESG is, it would be Texas. Texas has tripled its amount of solar in the last 3 years and expected to go up another 35% this year. Texas produces more wind energy than any other state by far. Are they doing that to be nice or to be woke? No, they're doing it because it's cheaper. And when we look around the world, what we're seeing is these new technologies, and this follows technological breakthroughs for the last 200 years. They spend a lot of time reaching cost comparability, and when they break through and are cheaper, faster, and better, they go straight up. It's described as an S curve, and then it flattens out. That's what we're seeing in a lot of technologies, not just solar and wind, but EVs and heat pumps and other things.
As you talk, I have to ask you about nuclear, because there's been a resurgence in interest in nuclear and sort of acceptability of nuclear. Where are you on that technology and what role it needs to play in all of this?
Well, first of all, there are two different kinds of nuclear, so let's try and separate the two. There's the existing technology that's been around, which still has plants in the United States. That's fission technology. People are trying to build smaller, safer fission reactors, and we'll see if, in fact, they can be both safe and cheap. I mean, the real problem with nuclear fission has been no one's been able to build a plant in the United States for a reasonable price for a long time. And so people think nuclear is somehow cheap. It's very, very expensive right now. Right. The other kind is nuclear fusion. That is a new, very difficult to achieve engineering feat. People have been saying, and I've talked to, there are probably 12 big companies trying to solve this. I've talked to the CEOs of 2 of them in the last couple of months, and they say, if everything goes great, we'll be meaningful in the market in 2040. That's 16 years away. We really don't have 16 years to wait. Right. If it comes, that's great. But we need to focus on the next 10 years and really get things going. So as far as I'm concerned, when we think about new electricity generation, that's not the place I'm looking to solve the shorter, intermediate term problem.
Speaking of urgency, this year is a presidential election. You are a supporter of President Biden. You've held fundraisers for him. What do you think conversely, a Trump presidency would mean for climate change and climate change policy?
Well, I think one of the things that I've been trying to say is that clean energy is winning in the marketplace. And it's kind of, you can say whatever you want as a politician, but if something is cheaper and better, people are going to buy it regardless of what you have to say. That's going to go on in the United States, I think, regardless. I think the big question for the United States is that under a Republican administration, we are not going to do the kind of international leadership, international cooperation to build the kind of global institutions and measurement systems so that in fact we can have a global response to what was once called global warming. This is a problem that concerns everybody on the planet, and we're not going to have the kind of cooperation that's necessary in coordination without American leadership. It's not like we're the only country, but we're an indispensable country. And if that, in fact, the Republican administration pulls back, as it did under the previous administration, and as they're saying they're going to, then the kind of leadership that we need and cooperation with China and India and the rest of the world won't happen. And that means that there'll be a delay in terms of building those international systems of cooperation, measurement, and standards.
What about even domestic legislation? I mean, former President Trump reportedly met with a bunch of oil executives and said, I'm going to get rid of the IRA if you guys support me. Now, I've spoken to some oil executives, and they say they don't like the inconsistency that we have seen in policy, right? That everything flips every 4 years. Do you think he'd even be able to get rid of the IRA if he indeed wins the election?
I think most of the IRA is stuff that has been deployed or where people have pushed to get things done so they can't be reversed. I think most of it is in red states, and it's created a lot of jobs. Mm-hmm. So I believe that in the United States, we are rolling. And yes, there will be different speeds, and maybe some of the new technologies will be slowed down because they won't get government support. But by and large, the United States is heading on a glide path that has been laid out by the Biden administration. And I think that it'll be slower and faster, but we're really going to get there. We are going to win this whole thing. Let me say, Julie, people think two things. They think we're an oil and gas country and we can never get off it. That is absolutely not true. We will get off it. It's a question of how fast.
Right.
And the second thing is people think we're in a climate doom loop, that basically we're destroying the natural world and we can't stop ourselves from doing it. And that is false. What I'm trying to say is this. Yes, this is a crisis, and it's probably a bigger crisis than most people understand. But it's really a challenge for us, and that's how we should think about it. This is something we will win. We will win it together. Inevitably, this is going to happen. The question is, the sooner we pull together, the sooner we work together, and the sooner we recognize that we're really all trying to make a better world for the future, a safer, better world. The sooner we recognize that we all want that same thing and just decide how best to do it, that's when I think the United States is going to step up and do what we've traditionally done, which is solve the big problems.
Right. I mean, it seems to me that's the tricky part, right? I mean, again, going back to the election, how many people, for example, are voting on this issue? It doesn't seem like, I mean, people are voting on inflation right now. They're not necessarily thinking about climate as their biggest issue.
I think that's true. And I think that one of the reasons I wrote this book was to say to people, this is something that really is important. This is something that really affects you. Most Americans agree with me, as you said. I mean, most registered Republicans agree with me. They just don't prioritize it.
Right.
What I'm saying is, this is not just something we have to do. This is a great opportunity for America to do the kind of things that we have done in the past, that we were really built as a country to do. And that involves accepting each other, not villainizing each other, but really coming together and solving big problems. That's what we do best, and that's what we're proudest of ourselves for.
Tom, thanks for being here. The book is Cheaper, Faster, Better: How We'll Win the Climate War. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.